everyone, and welcome to episode 25 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I want to talk about bringing your setting to life. Now, last week we talked about time, and is it in the past, in the present day, or in the future, and some suggestions with that. But today I want to talk about location, and a few suggestions of how you can use the location to really bring the reader into your setting and get them really involved in your story. So with no further ado, let's talk setting. Alrighty then, let's bring your setting to life. In this episode, we'll be in two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about the general location. And then the second part, I want to talk about different ways that you can add details to really make that setting pop and bring into your story. So let's get to it. Let's talk about the general location. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about if the general location is a city. Now, just talking about city, first of all, is your setting going to be a real city? Like, are you having it take place in a real city like New York or LA or Las Vegas? Or is it going to be a completely fictional city but set in the modern world? So let's say you decided you want to do a fictitious city, but it's going to be in Northern California. Let's talk about all of that. Now, first of all, you kind of need to know the logistics of your said city. So for example, if you are going to place it in New York, that's very different than placing it in like LA, even though both are huge metropolises. Anyway, they are both really, really big cities. The logistics of the two cities are very, very different. So for example, many people in New York, and again, I'm talking about New York City, commute to work on the subway. I mean, that's just a part of their everyday routine. But unless you are familiar with the city of New York, your reader may not know that. So for example, we don't have a subway. I live in Las Vegas. We don't have a subway. So if I was picking up your book back from when I was like 20 or 25, I would have absolutely no idea how a subway even works, because that's never been a part of my life. And that's of course true if you live in like LA as well. You're not commuting. You may be commuting by rail, possibly, but most likely you're commuting by car. And anyone who has been to LA can tell you about rush hour traffic in LA. All right. It is like a thing that's like a nightmare. Same with like Houston, even Las Vegas, which is not even the scope of those cities, but we also deal with commuting by car. Most people do. Some people ride the bus, and all of that is important for you to add to your setting. You have to remember that your reader may not be familiar with your city. So keep logistics in mind when you are presenting how your character is getting from point A to point B. Now that's just, transportation, but even things like grocery stores, your character needs to go pick up milk. All right, go and pick up whatever. Most people in, say, Las Vegas actually go to like a large supermarket to do their grocery shopping weekly, because that's what we have here. We don't really have neighborhood markets. But yet, if you go to like New York, a lot of people buy their groceries in the neighborhood market. That's, 2 blocks down, and then they just walk there, and then they walk back with their groceries. That is something I cannot even fathom. The nearest grocery store to me, if I wanted to get like bananas, is like 5 miles away. So that's not realistic in my world. So these are things you kind of need to think about incorporating into your book if your book is going to be taking place in a big city. Now let's talk more. Let's talk the atmosphere, the vibe. Cities like New York, Manhattan within New York, they give off a really special kind of vibe. Same is true of like downtown LA, same is true of like Orange County, San Francisco, even Vegas. And your character, if they are local, that's a big part of it. Are they a part of that vibe? Are they a part of this atmosphere? Because that is central to that location. Now, if you're inventing a city, right, a fictitious city, well, then you've got to invent the vibe that goes with it. Is the vibe going to be similar to that of California vibes, Southern California vibes, Northern California vibes, which, by the way, are very, very different. And let's not forget diversity. That's a big part of it too. If your story is taking place in Savannah, Georgia, there is a very different feel of diversity than there is in, say, Los Angeles, than there is in, say, Walla Walla, Washington, that there is in, say, Boise, Idaho. Each of these cities are very unique in the way their population is diverse or not diverse. And that should be a part of your setting because you want the readers to feel what it is like to be in this city. And so that is a part of it as well. And of course, if you're doing a fictitious city, you've got to kind of figure out the vibe that's going to go with this city in regards to race relations. I mean, is it taking place in Northern California? Is it taking place in Texas? Now, you're talking two very distinct atmospheres when it comes to diversity. So these are all things to consider when you are writing your book. Now, what if your book doesn't take place like in a city? What if the entire book takes place in like a mansion? Like you've got a cozy mystery that takes place in this mansion. You've got, the whole locked room thing where you've got, all these characters and detectives there to solve the murder, but no one can leave until this murder is solved and everything takes place inside this mansion. So now my advice to you, if you're doing a cozy mystery like this where everything takes place in this room, or even a romance where you're doing the romance and there's, a scandal with, is, the husband sleeping with the guest, anything like that. If it's taking place in a mansion, then my first suggestion to you would be to literally draw out the rooms on a sheet of paper of where every room is in regards to every other room. So picture like a clue board. How is someone going to get from the kitchen to the billiard room, and what rooms do they have to pass by, and how are they going to get there? Who is going to see them? Who is in what room seeing them walk by? And if you've got the upstairs and downstairs, then where are the stairs? What rooms are the stairs by? Is there more than one staircase? All of these are important logistics you should know before you start writing your book. How many doors does the mansion have that lead outdoors? Like my house, I have a smaller house. It's like 1,600 square feet. I have 3 different entrance points to my house, 3 different doors. I got the front door, I've got the sliding glass door that's in my kitchen nook area, and then I've got the door from my bedroom that leads to the back patio. Now that's 3 different entrance points just in my little tiny house. Large homes have more than that, and a lot of them have balconies upstairs, and those would have windows or doors that lead out there. I mean, these are logistics that you need to know if you are writing a mystery or if you're writing a romance. And we're going to get a little bit more into how to incorporate details about all of this in part 2. But for now, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. If you are new to the show, every week I give you a law, and it's kind of a crazy law, but it was a real law in history. And your challenge to flex those writing muscles is to write a story based on the law. It's just a fun way to kind of give you a distraction, flex those writing muscles. So here we go, this week's crazy law. In Hagerstown, Maryland, it is illegal to cross a street by using a rope suspended above it. Now, of course, that I've heard that law, I so totally want to actually try that. And if I was younger, that might be something I would actually try. I'm thinking Spider-Man here. All right, but anyways, it's up to you. Why, would they have made that a law? What happened that they needed to actually make that into a law? All right, let's get to part 2. How to incorporate details into your story. Now, let's talk about a city. Let's say you've chosen the city and you're writing the city and your main character is going from point A to point B. They're meeting friends at coffee shops. They're going to the library. They're going to different places. A lot of things you need to consider. If someone is unfamiliar with it, what is the weather of your city? Because if your character, say your story takes place in Seattle versus Las Vegas, we have very, very different weather patterns. So people are going to leave the house carrying very different things. I mean, very possibly your person from Seattle is going to be carrying an umbrella. Your person from Vegas probably doesn't even own one. They might. It's somewhere in the house. But I'm talking these kind of details are kind of important. That also weather affects driving. Like if your story was taking place in Las Vegas and it's pouring rain Everyone in Las Vegas knows streets flood. We know which streets flood, to which streets to avoid. And we all know, if we are native to Las Vegas or have at least lived here for 10 years, that the roads here are incredibly slick when it rains. Why? Because the other, 350 days of the year when it doesn't rain, all the oil from cars drips onto our very dry streets, and literally it's dried oil. And when it rains, they get slick. And I always laugh because people are always like, oh, people in Las Vegas don't know how to drive in the rain. And I'm like, no. People who live in Las Vegas and have lived here for a while, we know how to drive on our streets in the rain. People who move to Las Vegas from a rainy city don't know how to drive on the streets of Las Vegas in the rain. But these are important things that if your place, is taking place in Houston, or if it's taking place in Florida, the weather has a huge impact and can impact your characters. And that's something you should think about throughout the book, right? Not just on page 1, like it was a dark and stormy night, and then you never ever talk about the weather again for the next 2 weeks. Like, really, there aren't many cities where 2 weeks, the weather doesn't change within those 2 weeks. And it should be changing in your story along with the storyline progressing. But there's a lot of other things to think about. Think about the homes in different cities. If you live in, Manhattan, or if you live in Long Island, you're going to be living in a really small kind of apartment. Whereas if you live in like Wyoming, it's very, very different. But even just within the homes, architecture is very different. When I go to visit my nephews in Houston, I'm just in love with their architecture that they have there. I'm in love with the architecture of downtown San Francisco. I love old architecture. Of course, my favorite city is Rome. I love columns and I love all of that. But if you are taking place in Las Vegas, none of that is realistic. In Las Vegas, our homes are all made of stucco. Now, people who have never visited Vegas or are not accustomed to the very dry Southwest are not going to have a clue about the stucco homes. If you're going from house to house in your story, just throwing a little bit of detail about the stucco is a great way to kind of give people a visual of the type of architecture that there is in the city you've created. And going along with that, do they have gardens? I am one of maybe a handful of people that I know in Las Vegas that actually have a home garden outside, because it's so hard to grow stuff here. And yet I still try it year after year after year. And some years I'm successful, some years not so much. But if you live in other places where it's humid a lot, and a lot of people have home gardens and they grow herbs and they grow, tomatoes. We can grow tomatoes in Vegas. It's one of the good things that actually grows in Vegas. And flowers. We don't have a lot of flowers that grow in Las Vegas. We have very few plants that can withstand our crazy heat. But if you travel to if your story is taking place in Miami or Orlando or anywhere in the South, there's flowers everywhere, wildflowers growing. It's just amazing. What about the sunset? Vegas has amazing sunsets. A lot of places in the Southwest have amazing desert sunsets. And yet if you live in New York, maybe you're not accustomed to seeing the sunset, and that might be a detail that could be part of your story as well. What about the smells of the city? Everyone knows, if you go to Manhattan, there's just a smell. And I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just saying it's a smell. But if you've never visited Manhattan, you don't know what I'm talking about. And so when you're writing your story taking place in Manhattan, somewhere in the book, maybe just add a touch of what it smells like to be in downtown Manhattan, because it is very different than other places. And what are you hearing? Don't forget to incorporate sounds. If they're walking to a coffee shop in Manhattan, the sound of car horns and all of that is just so natural to people who are living there. But people who are visiting there, like when I visit New York, I'm always like, oh my gosh, why are they beeping? Why is everyone beeping? Because that's not something I am familiar with from the city I am in. So sounds that you hear are a great way to add detail that is really minor, and it's just in passing that you would say it, but it's a great way to bring the setting to life. And don't forget food. I know I've done a whole thing about food, but food is important too. What do people from New York call a whole pizza? They don't call it a pizza like we do in Vegas. They call it a pie, and that's just natural to them. Yet if you're not from New York, that wouldn't be something that you would know. Just these little things are ways to add details to your story to really bring the setting of where your story is taking place to life. Now, if you're doing a mansion, right? And you've got, everything's taking place in this house. You got a lot to a lot of visuals you got to give, because people need to know what each of the rooms looks like from the inside. But don't forget sounds. I mean, if your detective is downstairs and he hears creaking upstairs and he knows someone is walking across the floor, well, if your one character said they were in the kitchen that night, they would have heard it. So if they didn't mention it, then how could the killer have gotten from point A to point B upstairs? So creaking sounds, and that's also great for romance too, right? If your husband is downstairs in the kitchen getting a drink and he hears the creaking coming from his bedroom, and he hears the footsteps heading towards the house, the house guest's room, that might be a way to kind of get that scandal going. So don't forget about sounds and smells. Things smell a certain way in the, if there's bacon cooking in the kitchen and your character says, oh man, I was awakened to that smell of bacon, and their room is nowhere near the kitchen, that might be something your detective might be like, how could they have smelled the bacon when their room is so far from it? Where were they when they smelled that bacon cooking? So there are these cool ways that you can kind of incorporate smells into your story. And of course, think about stuff like, coffee. Coffee has a great smell, in my opinion, an amazing smell when it's brewing. And that is one of those things that just mentioning that in your story is a way to bring your reader into the setting. Well, I hope this has been, useful for you. And if so, please, please, please consider giving a like, subscribe, maybe leave a comment. I sure would appreciate it. And again, if there's something you would like me to talk about specifically on this show, then please, please, please drop a message in the comments. You can always email me, alba@albarango.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you. But until next week, be safe, take care, and use those details for your setting.